Hi guys, my name's Kieran, I'm from Clark Performance. Today we're going to spend a little bit of time just going over some of the rowing techniques used in the Jackie Pro workout at this year's Crossfit Games. It's a really interesting event to look at because the slight twist on the event this year was that everybody had to hit a certain time for their 1K before they could move on to the thrusters. So that meant that a few people were able to chill, a few people had to work a little bit harder than they would have liked to, and you can definitely see that reflected in some of the techniques that we're going to see later on in this video. So I wanted to make this video because I have been involved in rowing for 22 years, I've been coaching for the past 11, and I've been involved in the world of CrossFit for the past 6. So I definitely see the benefits of what rowing can bring to CrossFit and vice versa. So what I'm trying to get from this video is just to highlight who's doing what the efficient techniques are, which ones are less efficient, and hopefully to give you some stuff to go away and work on when you go back to the box and to take into your next rowing workout. So let's get down to it. So a good place to start is just to show what I think is the best example of rowing within CrossFit, and that's from Sam Briggs in one of the 2015 Open workouts. This was a live announcement, so obviously they didn't know what the workout was going to be until about 20 minutes before they started. I think Sam just demonstrates a really nice example of rowing. So a couple of things that we look for in a good rowing stroke, or just a good way of rowing, is length, power, and relaxation. I think Sam absolutely nails all of those basics. The other thing that you'll see CrossFitters often not doing is taking the time to really hang off the handle and take the time to accelerate with the legs and the hips before the handle comes through to the body. So if you have a nice little look at Sam here, she's really leaving that handle out there and just taking a long time to accelerate that flywheel through to the finish. When the camera does go onto her screen, she's sat at around 1,350 calories at a stroke rate of 27. So that's really good power for somebody who is a CrossFitter. That'd be good for somebody who is a rower as well, given what her body weight is. So this is a really nice example to start with of kind of what we would be looking for from a good CrossFit athlete in rowing. Okay, so first video we're going to have on the screen now is Dallin Pepper. So quite a new guy, still a teenager, I believe, just new to the games this year. What really stands out with Dallin and what you see in a lot of CrossFit athletes is that from when he begins the drive until when he ends the drive, the transition between pushing and pulling happens too early in the stroke. So I want you guys to just look at what his legs are doing. If you look at when he drives through into that second half of the stroke, his legs are not locking all the way out. So there's still a little bit of a bend in the knees. And what that means is that he's not fully, or he's not connected to the foot plates, so where the feet are mounted, as strongly as he could be. So if you think of when you're doing a power clean or a box jump, if you fail to fully triple extend, so if we're not fully extending that hip, knee and ankle angle all together, then ultimately you're not going to be able to get very high off the floor, and you're just going to be limiting how much power you're putting down. You can see this video now transfers into Brent Fikowski. Even though we can't really see what he's doing with his lower body, what he's doing really well with his upper body is just staying nice and relaxed. What we'd look for at the finish as a result of locking the legs out and sitting up a little bit stronger through the hips is then be able to keep those lats engaged as the handle comes through towards your sternum. So what Brent's doing really nicely is just keeping his shoulders, his traps quite relaxed and using those big lat muscles to just apply that last bit of pressure to the handle. Another common mistake you'll see with a lot of CrossFitters is coming out too wide with the elbows, and basically the wider your elbows are out from your body, then the less chance those lats are going to be engaged. So what you want to think about is that similar position if we're doing a press up, of keeping the elbows a little bit tighter into the rib cage and just maintaining a flatter wrist position. So from the inside of your elbow to the back of your knuckles wants to stay flat as you draw that handle through and apply that pressure through to the finish. So next up we have Carolyn Provost from Canada. Really like what Carolyn's doing. I think in particular the long powerful strokes that we mentioned with Sam Briggs earlier. So that's just taking the time to really build the acceleration on the flywheel from that catch position when we're slid all the way forward through to the finish position when the handle reaches the body. I think one thing Carolyn does really well is really generates a lot of force with how she drives her hips open. So when we're trying to generate force into the second half of the stroke in rowing, a really good focus is to think about just trying to drive your hips open against the foot plate. So again, similar to a squat or a box jump or standing up through a power clean, is just really focusing on that foot force. Because if you lose that and we have that bend in the legs that we saw with Dallin Pepper earlier, then all of a sudden you've lost that solid connection, and any force you're trying to generate with your hips due to the finish is no longer quite as effective. Where I think Carolyn could improve and be even more efficient is just with her recovery sequencing. So you'll notice at the moment she slides into the front, and then the last thing she does is lean forward with the body. What we'd like to see is just taking a little bit more time to get the hands away, get the body rocked forward, and then just be able to roll into the catch position with the body still and with the core tight. Okay, so if you're dropping the chest into that catch position, your core is not tight, and it's just going to take a couple of inches to get into that drive before we're really connected to the flywheel. So one thing to think about when you go into your next rowing session is just be able to slide into the front with your core tight and your hips ready to just take that leg connection that we're going to create at that front end of the stroke. All right, next up we've got the big man Roman Khrenikov. So interesting thing about Roman was in the online stage of the 2020 games during COVID, he pulled 2:48 for the 1K row. He was the winner of that event. That was about 9 seconds off the all-time world record. So for someone who doesn't specialize in rowing, he's obviously got tremendous engine and can put down a lot of power. I think what's really interesting about watching him in this video is just how relaxed he looks. One of the points I'd always coach in rowing is just about keeping the jaw relaxed and just keeping that impassive look on your face. To me, someone who's looking like that in the middle of a row, that's a sign of someone who's really in control of their power, their split and their rhythm. As we flick onto Saxon Panchik, they're obviously at the same stage of the 1K, you can just see he's got a little bit more of that tension through his jaw. His traps are engaged a little bit more, the handle's coming up a little bit higher. And to me, because of that tension he's got around the jaw and the neck, he's not as effective as he could be as he's applying that last bit of power through to the finish. So he spoke earlier about that lat engagement and keeping those wrists flat. So if you look at what he's doing with his wrists as the handle comes through, it just changes that position very slightly. So if you were doing a bent over row with a barbell, you wouldn't change your grip on the handle as the bar reaches your sternum. So it's exactly the same thing that we're trying to do with rowing. So if you want to keep applying that force through to the finish, you've got to keep that constant grip on the handle and get those lats engaged. Okay, and finally we've got Dani Speegle. So pulling 149 split at rate 29 there. So that's pretty good power output for that rate. Again, I think there's a lot of similarities between everyone who's doing this well. Is the main thing we're looking for, again, is those long, powerful, relaxed strokes. I think Dani does a really good job on that drive phase. Again, same as some of the athletes we looked at earlier, of just getting connected right at the front and then being able to just push all that power all the way through to the finish. In terms of how we want to sequence the drive phase, we always want to start with just the legs. So that one of the biggest mistakes you see CrossFitters or any less experienced rowers make is hinging too early. So until your legs are halfway down, so if this is your knees, your legs want to get about halfway down before your hips start to open. Okay, so if you hinge too early, you open your hip angle too early off the front, all that means is you then lose the power. That power always dies off into the second half. So if you look at a common theme between all these people that are doing well on the rower, is they're able to just connect their legs from the catch and then drive the hips open later in the stroke. I think Dani does a really good job of that. And again, lots of power from the hips into the finish. Clearly she's an incredibly strong athlete. So it's really nice to see someone like her playing to her strengths and doing what she does well in weightlifting, transferring that onto the rower. Again, where I think she could do a little bit better is just paying a bit more attention to that recovery sequencing. What you always want to think about with rowing is that the drive phase, you want to think about being like an Olympic lifter, and then the recovery phase, you want to think about being a ballerina. Think about how a ballerina moves when they don't just collapse down onto the floor. They're in control of every single one of their limbs, every single part of their body. And you've got to be really deliberate with that recovery sequencing to set you up for the next stroke. Because it can be a really positive cycle that if you use that recovery sequence to set your arms, your hips, and then your legs as you slide forward, then you're in a stronger position to drive, and then you'll get that positive cycle going. Whereas if you start letting that recovery sequence go a little bit sloppy, we're dropping the chest into the front, we're letting the handle go down near the ankles, then that's when it's going to start becoming much, much harder work. And I think Dani does a really, really good job of controlling that. But again, I'd just like to see her sitting up a little bit more into the front. That's it from me, guys. Really hope you found the video valuable and that it's given you some stuff to go away and work on in your rowing workouts back at your box. Please share the video, like, subscribe. Love to have conversations in the comments if there's anything that you didn't understand, anything you've got any questions on, just please ask away and I will get back to you. Super passionate about trying to improve the standard of rowing within CrossFit and just bring some of those training benefits as well. So yeah, enjoyed making the video. Hope you found it useful, and I'll see you in the next one.